about being boastful and proud. It says there in the book of Proverbs, being boastful or pride goes before the downfall. Pride goes before the downfall. And so Paul was is telling us here that in the last times, he considers these times as terrible, dangerous. And if you take a minute just to look at some of these descriptive words there, you will question yourself, just like I have, are we living in those terrible times? And I believe that we are there. Matthew chapter 15, these are two key verses that I'd like to share before we discuss some of these things that we see nowadays. Verses 18 through 20, it says there, Jesus says, but the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these are those that defile them. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murders, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person. Last night we said not only the person that is spewing out these these misinformation, not only that person that is speaking untruthful things, but also the hearers that receiving are being destroyed. The word defile, we said last night, these are the things that defile a person. Means these are the things that corrupt or pollute. I gave you a little illustration. A river, clean water, all of a sudden has sewage coming into it. And pretty soon you'll hear the announcement, don't drink of that water because that water has been contaminated. That water has been polluted. Not too many weeks ago, we heard the city of Austin having to boil their water because the water was unclean or polluted. That's what it means here. That the things that come out of a person's mouth, they come from the heart, and these can pollute others. These can defile, corrupt. It is not a language. It's not just spoken words thrown out there. And I'd like to begin with our leaders of this nation and the leaders around the world. How much have they polluted our societies by speaking lies? These are the things that defile not only our leaders, our nation, but also the hearers. Our society. Our society has been also contaminated. They come from the heart with evil thoughts, murders, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony. All these things, you see them. And you can think for yourself and wonder, how much have we been swimming in polluted, contaminated water? How long has it been since we have been hearing all these things that defile mankind? I like to say that the Bible says that as soon as mankind is born, he lies. He begins to speak lies. Given the first opportunity to lie, he will seize the moment, and this is the clearest and first evidence of sin. You saw it there last night in the Garden of Eden. When the Lord came looking for Adam and Eve, what did they do? They hid themselves. Why did they hit themselves? Well, because they had a conscience that they had done wrong, that they had sinned against God. They had disobeyed. They had rather given into a lie, a deception from the serpent, who was crafty. Someone who is very skilled in lying, someone that's very crafty in lying. Well, that person once said, one of our leaders, that person once said, he shows no guilt, no anxiety. He can simply, with clear eyes and a clear face and a steady hand point a finger and say without wavering, that person once said, I never had sex relationship with that woman. He was good at that. He practiced it. When you do that, when you become a very skillful liar, then the restraints are off. There's no limit. That's what you can do. And I'm speaking about our leaders in our nation. So the restraints are off, and he has become so good at covering, just like Adam and Eve, covering up all the faults, yet falling deeper and deeper into temptations. I never had sex relations with that woman. And then when he was proven wrong, he admits his guilt. And this is coming from the top. So if you think that those actions, those words do not pollute, do not contaminate our younger generation, it is no wonder that adultery now is just part of our society. Theft is part of our society. This is the way we live. It's not wrong stealing. Adultery is not that bad. It has found its way into our society, into the way we live. We have been swimming in contaminated water so long that we do not even know what is around us. The fear of lying becomes the restraint to all sorts of temptation. The fear of lying becomes the restraint to all sorts of temptations, which are the strongholds or the strong impulses of man's fallen nature. The fear of the Lord. Those are the restraints. Those are the things that can help our fallen nature become conscious of misinformation, of untruthful things. Romans chapter 3 describes it in this manner, verses 10 through 18. Romans chapter 3, verses 10 through 18. En Romanos, el capítulo 3, 10 al 18. As it is written, this is also taken from the psalmist, the book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah as well. As it is written, because it was written long ago. It find its place again in the New Testament. I've always said anything that crosses over from the Old Testament to the New Testament, I believe that it is calling us to give it a double attention, to give it more attention. As it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. They all have turned away. Why is that? They have together become worthless. Why is that? There is no one who does good, not even one. Why is that? Ask yourself. Their throats are open graves. Their tongues practice deceit. The poison of vipers is on their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet, they're swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery mark their ways. And the way of peace, they never come to know it. Why is that? The answer is there. Because there is no fear. There is no fear of God before their eyes. The fear of lying becomes the restraint of all sorts of temptations. But when there is no fear, when fear is removed, when God is removed, lying becomes destructive. Lying becomes destructive. When there is no fear of God before their eyes, and let me just say this in parenthesis, how many people out there fear God? Have you asked anyone, do you fear God? The answer might come back and say, well, I didn't even know he was interested in us. Or was he hearing us? Is he seeing us? There's no restraint, no fear of God. I like the way the psalmist puts it in Psalms 58, verse 3, if you care to note that. The New Century Version Bible, I like the way it sounds, but also the New King James Version also has a good interpretation. Psalm 58, 3, from birth. From birth, evil people turn away from God. They wander off and tell lies as soon as they are born. Can you imagine that? The New King James Version puts it, the wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies. In other words, as soon as the child is, it paints a picture there. As soon as the child is born, he turns away from God. He wanders off. And he starts telling lies as soon as he is born. They go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies. In the Spanish translation, los malvados se pervierten desde que nacen, desde el vientre más bien, materno, y se desvían por las mentiras o con los mentirosos. Los malvados se pervierten desde que nacen. Desde el vientre materno se desvían los mentirosos. Well, that has a strong implication there that is what we see in our generations. Or that is what we can see if we look for it very hard in mankind, says the book of Genesis. And so our world today is facing dangerous times because, it's not because I hear so much about air missiles, ground missiles, water missiles, all these disintegrate, but James gives us a different type of missile. James talks about the missile in the tongue. It can wage a wars. It can destroy mankind because of falsehood, because of lies. Of course, today they call it misinformation. And so all of these practices have somehow crept into our society, and it's just become part of who we are. Sexual immorality is nonetheless something that society is okay with. Lying and being untruthful, that's fine. Everybody does it. It is part of our society nowadays. But just like Paul said, we are in the last days because these are dangerous times. These are days that things can turn around from one day to another. We can have war, the battle in our front door. All because of deceitfulness, untruthfulness, and all these things, being boastful, having pride. A disregard for God, no fear in mankind for God. Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. We can assume that these are things that are practiced among our generation, and they are fine with it. But look very quickly at Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16. It says there are 6 things the Lord hates. 6 cosas que el Señor aborrece. I wonder what are those 6 things? Maybe even 7. Quizás algún 7, ¿verdad? 7 that are distasteful to him. Haughty eyes, verse 17. A lying tongue. I always think that haughty eyes and lying tongues, they kind of like paint a good picture of being deceitful. of a person that's deceitful, has evil intentions. You'll always see him with haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community, in the city, or with his brother. These are 6 things that the Lord hates. These are 6 things that bring to God, to the Lord, displeasure. These are things that to him, they become like an abomination, or they are called an abomination as well in other parts of Scripture. Why is this thing? Because the Lord knows that an evil heart has a deceitful thoughts, a lying tongue can bring about destruction. And so all these things, they stir up conflict in the community, and all these things bring destruction. Again, it doesn't bother people today to lie. But let me tell you something. If you read what I read there, it bothers God. It bothers God so much that he hates that attitude. Why is that? Well, because we go back to the book of Genesis chapter 3. We have seen what has happened to the first couple that came on earth, on planet earth, and what happened there, the serpent deceived Adam and Eve by telling them the fruit's okay, you can eat from that fruit. As soon as they ate that fruit, the prohibited fruit, it says that their eyes were open. Their eyes were open. They thought about being dominant, being gods, knowing good from evil. They thought they could handle that. And the Lord said, let's put them out of the Garden of Eden, because if they happen to eat out of the tree of life, they're going to want to live forever. And so he throws them out of the Garden of Eden. Proverbs 29:12. Proverbs 29:12. We find this proverb there, and I think this is very true in our present world today. All the way from the White House to the common house, all the way from intellectual people, all the way down to the simplest common people. But there, verse 12 says, if a ruler listens to lies, all his officials, what happens? They become contaminated. Now think about that. How many leaders have our nation had that spew out lies? How many leaders have you seen in this past 10 years or so that have spoken nothing but false? I've seen them. And I register them, and I see what they say. And so if a ruler listens to lies, his followers also become corrupt. Cuando un gobernante, el verso 12, cuando un gobernante se deja llevar por mentiras, y no me va a decir usted que los gobernantes no se dejan llevar por mentiras, porque el hecho está muy se ha manifestado. Cuando un gobernante, y no solamente en este país, sino que en todo el mundo, todos los gobernantes se han involucrado en las mentiras. Cuando un gobernante se deja llevar por mentiras, dice que todos sus oficiales se corrompen. Esto es lo que ha sucedido. Y eso en parte es una batalla, una guerra que se está iniciando. La guerra nomás por palabras. El peligro nomás porque uno dijo una falsedad. That is the war that's being fought today. A war of words. If I can dominate you, if I can threaten you, maybe you'll back off. But can you imagine a leader spewing out false information, lies, can trigger out something from one moment to the other? Romans chapter 1, we have a listing there of why God is angry at some of these things that are here on earth, and we're going to see them very quickly. Verse 18 and on. Romanos 1, el verso 18 en adelante. Verse 18 of Romans chapter 1, the wrath of God. Ciertamente, dice ahí, la ira de Dios. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all godlessness, wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Who suppress the truth by their wickedness. The wrath of God. La ira de Dios viene revelándose desde el cielo contra toda impiedad, toda injusticia a los seres humanos que con su maldad, dice, obstruyen la verdad y se inclinan a la mentira. In parenthesis, most perversions, most wickedness or evil are now acceptable in our world today, or have been for some time. Let me repeat that. Most perversions, most wickedness are now acceptable in our world today. Lies have become more useful. I know that sounds kind of strange, but people, when they tell a lie or misinformation, it is with an intention. They have use for that. They have use for that. It's not just because they want to say something that is not true, but they're looking, there's a scheme behind it. There's something that they're manufacturing in their thoughts. Lies have become more useful. Lies have even become more important. Lies are very important in our society today. Lies have even become more demanding. Demanding. You believe that? Lies have become more demanding than truth. You can turn your TV on, just see any of the newscasters out there, journalists, so-called, want to make a living. And so to catch your attention, what do they spool out? Misinformation. And then they come back and say, well, we're sorry, we didn't mean that, but we already anchored you in. So lies are more important. Lies have become more demanding than truth. And so we ask ourselves, does truth matter? Does truth matter? We know it matters to God, right? We know it matters to God. But does it matter to you? Does truth matter? If your life were in danger today, if you were at risk of losing your life for some unexcusable or something out of the norm that perhaps comes, would truth matter to us? Would truth matter to you? If your life was in danger, would truth matter to you? And you would answer, of course it does. If my life was in danger, I would want to be told the truth. Don't go out there because you're going to be killed. You're going to be murdered. There's someone out there. So if the truth were told, or if the truth matters, how important it is, we would say yes if our life were in danger. And let me say this. Paul says that we are living in dangerous times. Paul has already settled that question for us. We are facing all these things that are mentioned there. Sexual immorality, theft, murders. We live in a post-truth world, they tell us. A post-truth world. People need some lies to cover up their weakness spots. People will use lies for personal satisfaction, personal fulfillment, or even to get along or advance themselves. People will use lies. Is that destructive? Is that dangerous? Adam and Eve did not see it at the moment they ate that fruit, but the consequence of disobeying God fell upon them. They were excluded. They were put out from the Garden of Eden. They were given a task. Now from this point on, God told Adam and Eve, this is the way you will live, and you're going to suffer, and you're going to work for your substance. So people tell lies for personal satisfaction, personal fulfillment, and just to get along or advance themselves. Another question that came to mind, why would we lie today? Have you ever thought about that? Why am I going to lie today? Why would we lie today when there's really nothing to cover? When there's really nothing to be ashamed of, why would we lie today? Because everything in our world is okay. So there's no sin. There's no reason to lie, you might think, or people might say. Why would we lie today? If man wants to be a lover of another man, so be it. If a woman wants to have a relationship with another woman, and they say a lie that's the way God brought me to this world, that's society for you. No shame. And as soon as we start accepting these changes, sooner or later, we face destruction. Altogether, we will face destruction. And so we read there in Romans chapter 3, or chapter 1 rather, verse 22. It says there, although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. They exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings, and birds and animals and reptiles. What's the consequence? What follows? Verse 24. Therefore God gave them over in their sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurities, for their degrading of their bodies one with another. They exchanged the truth about God for a a lie. In the beginning, God created man and a woman. But our intellectual individuals of our